This is the day that the Lord has made, and we will continue to rejoice and to be glad in it. If you were looking for a reason to give God praise, just look. And the fact that you can see me and that I can see you is proof positive that God is still in the blessing business. He is still in the miracle working business, and for that we are grateful. This is a day of worship. It is the second Sunday in the new year, but it is an extra special day for us at Faith Church as we celebrate Rickey Davis Day. Would you stand with me, please, to honor the ministry gift of Rickey Davis, 10 years of service at this great church. Amen. Let's pray together, and showtime is coming to bless us in song. Lord, we are forever grateful for all that you do and how you do it. Thank you for this day and for all that it means. Thank you for your servant, for his family, and all those who have come to celebrate with him. Bless now what we do and what we say. Allow it to be pleasing in your sight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Praise the Lord, everybody. Praise the Lord. Come on, praise the Lord, everybody. Has he done anything for you? Come on, why don't you sit into your feet this morning? Now listen, if he's done something, I'm going to need you to act like he's done something. I know that when the Gators are playing, or when the whoever they are, when they're playing, listen, we got, when our fraternities are scrolling and our sororities, we do our thing. So this morning, for Jesus, show me what you got. How many believe that today will be the best day of your life? Come on, do you believe that today will be the best day of your life? All right, let's go. Listen to this. Say, I believe that you did. The best day of my life. I believe that you did. For me. The best day of my life. I believe that you did. Will be the best day of my life. I believe that you today is the best day of your life. Let me see those hands. Everybody saying, hey, the best day of my life. 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 God is truly good, isn't it? Amen. Today will be the best day of my life. Anybody really believe that? Anybody receive that? Amen. Amen. So that means we're all ready for a blessing this morning. Yeah. Anybody ready for a blessing this morning? Amen. Hallelujah. Open up your mouth and let the
praised with them all the time. I just knew he was going to be sitting down. He's supposed to work on Rickey Davis Day. He's clocking in while I go in the back. I said, you ain't got to clock in today. It's Rickey Davis Day. But I just knew it was going to be hard for him to sit still. I wouldn't have expected anything different. I want his parents to come at this time to share their comments, and then Rick is going to come. Let's give them a great big hand. Amen.
You don't know how much we appreciate you. You came along in Rickey's life at a time he really needed somebody in his life. He's at the point he was ready to give up. He went here, went there, you had your nose, you had your yes. Some used you for what to give them, but never paid you what you deserve to be paid. They never even gave you recognition of what you need to have. I thank God for my son, how he strived. I thank God for blessing him at the time that he gave him. I thank God for giving him to me. I thank God because we have not even reached even a tip of his ability that God had instilled in him. He's been used along this way. I used to always tell the son, there's nothing wrong with getting paid for what you do. People call you when they can use you, but they don't never want to compensate you. They want to say, Rickey, can you come? Rickey, can you come? And me and Rickey, he always went. I'm like, son, can they call this person? No. Can they call that person? No. Why they calling you? Because they know you're going to do it free from your heart. I said, son, you need to start charging. Don't give it $5, $10, whatever it is. Get what you need to get. Because gas ain't free. Your time ain't free. For him to get the fact that I am worthy of this. I am truly worthy of my time that God gave me. So nothing wrong with me telling you, like, you got to pay me because my gas ain't free. I go down this road, here, I go there, but still yet, you want me to make it free. So I down that road. And I thank God for Pastor Thought, because he stepped in and gave me what he needed to get down that road. There's nothing I would do for my children. Anybody know me know that. I want to encourage mine, because you ain't got to encourage mine, because I can encourage mine. And I thank God because he got a family that loves him, going to support him. I got you when you're up, I got you when you're down. And I love you, son. So if you never doubt that, which I know you don't, because I try to show you everything I do and I say that I love you. And I agree all the time. I ain't gonna say we don't always agree. But you know mama love you.
Come on, give it up for mom.
This time, coming to the stage, the one and only Rickey Davis. Come on, give him a great
My mom said, when I came across Pastor Thorpe, it was if we say it was a rough time in life, it is be an understatement. I was at a crossroad. I didn't want to play no more. I didn't want to live no more. 24 years old. Living home with parents. And just didn't know which way I wanted to go in life. I had no direction. I had no goal at the time, no nothing. And I just needed somebody, besides my parents, obviously. I needed somebody who would really just believe in me. Not what I can do, you know what I'm saying? Not my gift, not anything. Just believe in Rickey. And I came across this man, and I'll tell you, you saved my life, man. I always tell you I appreciate you. I say that all the time. But you don't know exactly how much I appreciate you. If I had not came across you, I wouldn't be doing that. And that's the honest God truth. The last 2 years or so, everybody knows. You know what I'm saying? My older sister, she passed away. That was the person who really got me to play in the first place. Talking my first chord and everything. My dad bought all three of us little small little keyboards for them. They played their keyboard. I ain't on mine. So they thought I was going to be a drummer. But my two sisters, they knew how to, you know what I'm saying, do a little chords. You know, they was older than me, so they went to school, had music class, you know, like the department and all that kind of stuff. So Dee came in my room one day and she just showed me a chord. And I just fell in love with it from there. And it's been rough. Been rough. Losing your biggest cheerleader. Losing your thank you, man. Yeah. I thank my church family because y'all stepped in as well. Y'all showed me so much love that I never knew that I could have. And Rob, Pez, my brothers, man, I appreciate y'all. Seen a lot of change going on in my 10 years here. You know. Seen a lot of change in my 10 years here. I spent like 7 years with you, Greg. Me and Greg had about 7 years. Me and Greg worked together outside of your interviews. That's a little big door right there. But one thing that's been consistent through all the changes is the fact that you have my back. That never wavered, never changed. University of Orlando. So I would come here, go to school from 9 to 5. I'll test grade, and it'd be like 15 minutes late. I'll send him to the track so he can do rehearsal until I get here. I get here about 7:15, 7:30. We do rehearsal. I go to their house, I go to sleep the next morning, go back to class, go to class on Friday, sometimes Saturday, on the road, come back here to be here for 8 o'clock service. Had no shoes. But I did that for 2 years, and you know, I don't regret doing that at all. Because when you come across a family that supports you, that loves you, that appreciates you, you know, I'll do anything for you. I'll do anything. I thank all y'all for coming out on this day. I don't really know how to reset me. I really don't know how to take these kind of things because I always go to other people's appreciations, you know, and now I have my own. So I mean, I thank everybody. Thank my parents for disciplining me, for loving me, for supporting me when I didn't deserve it. Hey, my son. Come on. It's my little inspiration right here. On top of Pastor Thorpe, you know, coming through in a time where I need somebody to come through. God saw fit to give me him. And sometimes I don't want to go. Sometimes I don't want to move. Sometimes I don't want to go forward. Then I have him. I see a little smile and just look at me like, Dad, I love you. God, thank you. Okay? Thank you. Being an awesome son. Awesome motivator. Thank you very much. Family in the front row, you know, pull that family. You too deep. That's Brother Dave, my Showtime family. I've been with y'all since 2012, about 7 years. And the moment that I came to rehearsal, y'all embraced me from the first moment I came in. On top of having this church, y'all have been a big inspiration and a big blessing to me. You know, on top of having support from my pastor, to know that I have a family in y'all who supports everything in me. Y'all supported me when I graduated school, supported me going to school, y'all supported me through everything. You know, and you know, I make funny faces in rehearsals and all this kind of stuff. But whatever. I'm sorry. Well, I want y'all to know, like, I say it every now and then, but I truly love and appreciate y'all. I really do. I want y'all to understand that. You know, it's not just a play, oh, good to see you, love you. No, like, I genuinely love y'all. Mama Irish, Pop, I love y'all. Kiana, you got the same last name, so the fact that when they first came here, we had the last name, and we just pretty much played from there. They took me as their own son, and I appreciate and love y'all. The Wilsons, I love y'all. I don't want to be name called. I'm gonna get somebody gonna shoot me. But I'm just screaming off the dub. Hey, Toy. Big Bang Days, everything. Everybody, you know, it's everybody. I mean, I don't want to be name called. Somebody gonna shoot me, give me a DM, and shoot me and say, you ain't say my name. And I'm talking too long right now. But thank y'all. Thank y'all so much. I love each and every last one of y'all. And hopefully God's keeping me on this earth. I can give you another 10.
Come on. One and only. this time, as you remain standing, we want to be a blessing to Rick in every way that we can. And one of those ways is something that he can take with him when he goes out of the door. In the foyer, once this time of celebration is over, we won't be long. We know there are a number of musicians here who play for the churches, and we want to make sure that everyone was out in time for you to make it to your job. But we want to honor Rick through our giving. We want to be a blessing to him financially. So I want you to take your best gift. Your best gift is 10 years it's been here. If you are writing a check, you can make that check out directly to Rickey Davis. If you want to give electronically through your debit or credit card, see Sister Katina Davis, wave to us, Sister Davis, and we'll swipe you out in Jesus' name. Is that Mr. Carl Watts? Wave to us, Rickard. God bless you. Thank you so much for being here. Now, for just a second, all the musicians, if you just wave your hand so we can see you and Rick can see you, all musicians, God bless all of you. Thank you so much for your presence here today and all that you do. Make it out the check, make it out to Rickey Davis. Our ushers are giving us direction. We're starting from the rear. This section to my right will come down this aisle to give up front. This section will come down this aisle. This section will come down this aisle and give up front. All right, we're moving now.
She'll teach you everything I know. You take me under your wings, man. I can't tell you if you taught me everything. You know, because I'm sure you know a lot more than you taught me. But one thing you taught me was about believing in yourself. And that has taken me farther than anything. And I appreciate you. I love you, man. Enjoy your day. It's about you. Peace.
Amen. Sheldon Graham all the way from the 813 on Example 4. And the story he was alluding to when I first noticed that Sheldon was our percussionist for a number of years. And I noticed him one day on keys. And I said to him, I said, Shell, we're going to bring you from off the drums and play keys with Rick on the organ, and then we'll hire someone else to play drums. What I didn't know is he only knew 5 songs. He only play in C sharp. I didn't know that, so I was learning something too. Amen. I want to ask us Ramona Jackson to come at this time with a very special presentation for Brother Rick.
Some ask Brother Rick coming up, please. This is absolutely positively beautiful. And it's good to know that you are giving back the same thing that you received, because that's what you're supposed to do. So, congratulations. You're going to be showered with so much love. So I just wanted to kick it off from us. It's a small little token. You spoke about You spoke about support, and sometimes we need like little mementos that we can look at all the time as a constant reminder of our support and our biggest cheerleader. So my awesome friend Cynthia, I did a little research and picking. We found something that we thought that would be special for you, and we wanted to kind of like put it in a way that it can never be destroyed, and you can always take it with you and put it everywhere as a reminder of your angel that's always with you. We love you, Rick.
I knew that was going to happen. But it is a beautifully customized fracture photograph of Rick, his sister who left us too soon, and both of their older sons. Let's celebrate what God continues to do. Showtime is coming to bless us in song. Let's give them a great big hand as they come.
You are the source of our strength. Lord, you are the strength of our lives. I lift my hands in total praise. Come on, wherever you are, just lift those hands in the air. And when you think, you'll begin to thank. When I think of your goodness, Lord, I begin to thank you, because if it had not been for the Lord who was already on my side, worthy of honor, Father, and if you never do another thing for us, you've already done enough. You you are the strength of my life. For I lift my hands in total praise to you. Everybody sing right here, sing. Hallelujah. How many know where your help comes from? Come on, even though your life may be in turmoil right now, your peace you give me. Come on, in every storm, say, "Father, you come on, hallelujah, Lord, you are the strength of my life. And because of it, I lift my hands. Come on, without any music, come on, say, Lord, I Lord, I know where my help comes from. Say it softly, say, your peace. In time of the storm.
shout, amen. That's a good place. So put and amen. Come on. That's a fine place. Put and amen. Bless the Lord, oh my soul. And all that is within me, bless his name. Well, one of the things that we learned about Brother Rick over the years is that he is a fan of the University of Florida and the Fighting Gators. Fighting Gators. And we want to wish Rick a happy 10th anniversary Gator style. So I called my friend, Coach Mullen, of the Florida Gators, and told him that we were recognizing you for your 10 years of service. And Coach Mullen wanted to wish you a happy 10th year anniversary. And because he could not be here in person because he is on the road recruiting, he signed the Florida Gators football for you. Amen. Go Gators, go Gators, go Gators, go Gators, go Gators. Go Gators, go Gators, go Gators, go Gators. Would you stand with me, please, as we honor the reading of the Lord's Word? And thank God again for all of you and for all that you mean to Rick and to the body of Christ. 2 Timothy chapter 4, I want to read verse 9 down through verse 11. And this is going to be very similar to the dad who had the family's dog had their tail removed and came back and announced to his family, it won't be long now. Y'all catch that? Y'all catch that on the way home? Y'all catch that on the way home? We have one other special presentation that we'll make in just a moment. Right, Peter, you can switch me to 1. And thank God for all of the staff members, all of the volunteers of our church, and then for all of you. We are greatly, greatly honored by your presence. Thank God for all those who have participated in this time of celebration for Rick's family, his friends, and musicians and people who have worked with him down through the years. Really want to thank Showtime for not exchanging any words. I told them it was Ricky Davis Day, and all they wanted to know is, Pastor Thorpe, what can we do to help make this day all the more special? And for that, I am thankful, and for the band and then all the folks who work with us on a regular basis. I'm reading from the New American Standard Version. Do you have it, Sister Ramona? We're ready. I'm ready for it. Just before I read, one other presentation that we would like to make, Brother Rick, on behalf of the Faith Church. We want to not only thank you verbally for all these years of service, but we want to bless you with $3,000 to help show our appreciation for what the Lord has done for you. Amen. We love you. We thank God for you. Love you. Love you, brother. Amen. Praise God. Love you. Amen. Thank God. Amen. 2 Timothy chapter 4. I want to read verse 9 through verse 11. I'm reading from the New American Standard Version of the Sacred Scriptures. Let's read these verses together. 2 Timothy chapter 4, beginning in verse 9. make every effort to come to me soon. For Demas, having loved this present world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, Titus to Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. Pick up Mark and bring him with you, for he is useful to me for service. I want to talk this morning about the last man standing. The last man standing. You may be seated as we talk about the last man standing. Paul, as he pens this letter, does not do so from the comfort of a Jerusalem suite, but he writes from the dim, dank, narrow confinements of a Roman prison cell. It is under these conditions that Paul boils his life down to its lowest common denominator and reflects on the God who saved him and the people who supported him. He then takes all of his supporters and divides them into three separate and distinct categories. When he describes them, first of all, Paul reveals that some of them were unreasonable. And I want to challenge you in your own life as you examine your circle of friends and your circle of supporters. I want to challenge you to be able to identify that some of the folks you roll with are unreasonable. Paul mentions it in verse 9 through verse 10 and then verse 14 through verse 16. Here's verse 9. He says to Timothy, make every effort to come to me soon. Why? For Demas, having loved this present world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. When you drop down to verse 14, he says, Alexander the coppersmith did me much harm. The Lord will repay him according to his deeds. What Paul is doing is identifying that some of those who used to be his supporters were those who were unreasonable. He not only shows us as he breaks all of his supporters into three different categories. He not only reveals that some were unreasonable, he also reveals that some of his supporters were usable. There were some people in Paul's life that he could use. Watch what he says in verse 10. Demas, having loved this present world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. That's unreasonable. But then he describes that Crescens has gone to Galatia and Titus to Dalmatia. Watch verse 12 and verse 13. Tychicus I have sent to Ephesus. When you come, bring the cloak which I left at Troas with Carpus and the books, especially the parchments. What he's saying is, I had some folks who used to walk with me who don't walk with me anymore. But then he said there were those who consistently walked with him. Some of his supporters were unreasonable. Some of them were usable. But then he gives a third category. Some of his supporters were redeemable. I love this because when you read verse 11, Paul says to Timothy, only Luke is with me, but pick up Mark and bring him with you, for he is useful to me for service. Now you got to be a Bible reader to understand the value of Paul sending for Mark. In Acts chapter 12, when Paul went on his first missionary journey, he brought this young man named Mark with him. But by Acts chapter 13, Mark became homesick and went back home. By Acts chapter 15, when it came time for them to go on their second missionary journey, Barnabas said to Paul, let's go back and get Mark. And Paul said, the devil is a lie. because we brought him with us in Acts chapter 12. He got homesick and went back home in Acts 13, and I'm not about to take him with me in Acts chapter 15. The contention was so great between them until Barnabas took Mark and went one way, and Paul took Silas and went another way. Yet, by the time Paul got to the end of his earthly life, the same Mark that he cut off in Acts 15, he sent for him in 2 Timothy chapter 4. Some of you, as a part of your New Year's resolution, you've made a list of all the people you want to cut off. Let me make a suggestion to you. Before you cut people off, make sure that your cut list looks like God's cut list. Because some of the folks you penciling out, you ought to be penciling in. And some of the people you cutting off, you need to be cutting up. And it's some other cutthroat folks that you need to be pointing to the door. He breaks all of his supporters into three separate and distinct categories: those who were unreasonable, those who were usable, and then those who were redeemable. But did you see verse 11? Paul says, with all the folks who have come and all the folks who have gone, when he gets to verse 11, he says, only Luke is with me. In Paul's life, Luke was the last man standing. And I want to show you three of the characteristics of God concerning Luke that are appropriate to this gathering that we celebrate today. One of the first things that screams to us from this text is this: God can bless a man like Luke. Oh, if you study Luke's history, you will discover that by trade, Luke was a physician, which means he was already a baller and a shot caller. He was a physician by trade. It is believed that he was led to Christ by Paul. Of all four gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, of all the 41 penmen who participated in writing the Old and New Testament, only one of them was a Gentile and not a Jew by birth, and that was Luke. What I'm getting at is, when you have the kinds of characteristics that Luke had, God can bless you. Dr. Jones, the only reason we know that the Lord will give us power after that the Holy Ghost has come upon us is because Luke told us. The only reason we know that 3,000 souls can get saved at the same time is because Luke told us. What are you getting at, Thorpe? God can bless a man like Luke. Well, not only does the text reveal that God can bless a man like Luke, God can use a man like Luke. When Paul, at the close of his earthly life, writing from prison, declares, everyone else has left me. Some I sent away because their service would better be rendered at a different location. But Paul thought it not robbery to mention that Luke was the last man standing. By this time, Paul is up in age. He is struggling from an eye infirmity that made him repulsive to look at. And most scholars believe that Luke was not only his companion in ministry, but Luke was helping to take care of him physically. The Lord was using Luke. And I want to ask you, when you examine the people in your life, do you hang out with some blessed people and some useful people? All I'm trying to get at is, I don't want to hang out with nobody that the Lord doesn't want to hang out with. Paul didn't mind hanging out with Luke because Luke was blessed and Luke was useful. God can bless a man like Luke, but then he can use a man like Luke. And as we look back on these 10 phenomenal years of service, all I can think about is how the Lord has used Rickey Davis down through the years. The largest pipe organ in the world is in Atlantic City, New Jersey, in what is called Boardwalk Hall. This pipe organ, Brother BJ, is so large until it has 33,114 pipes. It is a monstrosity, the largest in the world. If you are familiar with pipe organs, they are very difficult to operate. A day came when Time magazine was interviewing the famed organist who played this organ. The reporter walked into Boardwalk Hall, and there was a person standing right next to the organ. And the reporter said, "Are you the famous organist that we have heard so much about?" To which that person responded, "Oh, no, I'm not the organist." They said, "Well, why are you standing so close to the instrument?" The person responded that in order to play this organ, you got to keep both hands on the keys and the controls, both feet operating foot pedals, which means you can't turn the sheet music and play the instrument at the same time. And the person standing next to the organ says, "I'm not the organ player. I just stand here and turn the page." Because the organist can't do what they need to do unless I'm here doing what I need to do. And I learned very early on, Sister Deshauna, in ministry, that as a pastor, you can't do it all. That God will surround you with some people who just stand there and turn the page, so that you can focus on what you do and they can focus on what they do. God can use a man like Luke. Well, not only can God bless a man like Luke, not only can God use a man like Luke, but God can build with a man like Luke. And the problem with a whole lot of us, we talk about it all the time, we brag. We say our circles are so small until we talk into ourselves. Well, Jesus had 12 disciples. Now, one of them was a devil, but when he got rid of him, they replaced him with another one. Some of the things that God is calling you to accomplish are going to be so much bigger than you until it's going to take a righteous squad to get the job done. And God not only blessed Luke, he not only used Luke, but he was able to build a team around Luke. It's in the text. Watch verse 9. Paul says to Timothy, "Make every effort to come to me soon." That's interesting, because when you get to verse 11, he says, "Only Luke is with me." Paul, the question becomes, if you got Luke and you're writing to Timothy asking him to come, how many friends do you really need? You already got Luke. Why are you sending for Timothy? And then in the rest of verse 11, after he says, "Only Luke is with me," he says, "Make sure you bring Mark with you." Here's what I'm getting at. If you learn to appreciate the Lukes in your life, God will send you a Timothy, and God will send you a Mark. Let me put it where you can really get it. If you learn how to appreciate your Luke, God will send you a Lucretia. He'll send you a Timothy, and he'll send you a Timothea. He'll send you a Mark, and he'll send you a Markeisha. If you learn how to appreciate what you have, The Lord will build a team all around you. Brother Rick, thank you for 10 years of Lukean service. Because the Lord not only blesses you, He not only uses you, He's been consistently building a team around you to help you do all that God has called you to do. A 747 aircraft is a modern marvel. It holds between 524 and 565 passengers. It flies at a top speed of 565 miles per hour. It can carry 65,000 pounds of cargo. It holds 48,445 gallons of fuel. But whenever you see a 747 airplane parked at the gate, the plane is never by itself. There's always a little truck hooked up to the front of the plane. The truck doesn't have a windshield. The truck doesn't have any doors, but the truck is always hooked to the plane. And Crystal, my question is, with a machine that seats 524 to 565, flies at 565 miles per hour, 65,000 pounds of cargo, 48,445 gallons of fuel, what is the truck for? As large and as technologically advanced as the plane is, it does not have a reverse gear, which means even though it maxes out at 565 passengers flying at 565 miles per hour, it still needs a little help to get out to the runway. Brother Rick, I want to thank you for 10 years of helping me get out to the runway. On behalf of Faith Church, I want to thank you for 10 solid years. That's 520 Sundays of helping us get out to the runway. And oh, if I could switch places with you this morning and sit where you sit, I believe the testimony that's in your heart is when you look up to God, I never could have made it without you. I'm wiser. Wish I had somebody who knew what I was talking about. I'm stronger. I'm better. When I look back over all you brought me through, I'm able to realize it was you that I was able to hold on to. I never could have made it without you. That ain't all. Another Marvin Sapp song rings in my soul as a testimony. And Rick's testimony is, Lord, you saw the best in me. When everyone else around me could only see the worst in me, you saw the best in me. But one of the things I love about Rick, he's not only new school, sometimes he's old school. Let me reach back and grab my James Cleveland. Rick's testimony would be, I don't feel, no waste time. Come too far from where I started from. Nobody told me that the road would be easy, but I don't believe he's brought me this far to leave me. What are you saying, Thought? Let him bless you. Let him use you, and let him build all around you. And even when the world around you falls, you and God will be the last man standing.